Hello, everybody. I'm back for another Brush Sauce critique. This theme is Dragon, and I think the Dragonrider, something like that. Jessica is back joining me this week. Adam wanted to be here, but we've had several rescheduling, and I forget the camera's on this screen. We've had several rescheduling, and Adam just couldn't be here, unfortunately. But he wishes everybody luck, and he gives his best. So with that said, there is an astronomical amount of submissions this month. So we're going to keep things pretty direct and straightforward to keep moving things through. We're going to try to give everybody a fairly fair amount of time. We'd love to spend 10, 20 minutes a piece on every one of these, but it's just going to have to be really kind of quick and direct.
Yeah, there were over 40 submissions, so if we spend more than a couple minutes on each, we'll be here for hours.
Yeah, and I think we're already going to be here for a very long time. And so, with that said, if the challenge continues to grow in this sort of popularity level, I have to eventually change the format, because the format just doesn't work well when there's a super high amount of submissions, which is fine. Things will just have to evolve and change if this is going to continue to be the precedent. With that said, I'm going to open a couple on screen at a time. We'll go through them and open up the next batch. All right, so first up is Yuri. Yuri, I like this. This came out great.
Yeah, I really like this one. There's a lot of cool stuff going on in this one. One of the things that I noticed, especially because I saw some of the works in progress on Discord, was that the addition of the yellow crystals in the front is really distracting. And I actually think it was a stronger piece before the crystals were added. Compositionally, I feel like they kind of take over the piece.
Almost like if there was like a hint of like a campfire there that burnt out, and it shows that they just kind of had a little bit of a rest, and you see the smoke kind of it could be a little bit more subtle. I don't know, there's just that.
Yeah. For me, it comes down to like, what is the heart of the piece? Is it the dragon? Is it the girl? Or is it the crystals? And right now, because of the contrast and the bright color, the crystals are definitely saying like, I am the most important piece. I'm the heart of the picture. And I don't think that that is actually what is the heart of the piece. I think that it should be either the girl or the dragon. And if it was something more subtle, like a burnt out campfire or something, it wouldn't steal the show from them.
Now, the alternative solution is you have to integrate this color into other facets of the image. That means maybe having yellow flowers somewhere, maybe the character's outfit or suit, right, has yellow on it as well. You know, just the way it sticks out now is almost a little bit too much. Other than that, I think the rendering, is really good. The wings look a little funky the way it's kind of all folded in there. How do you feel about that, Jess?
Yeah, I agree. There's a little bit of like this artificiality to the structure of the wings. I feel like, what you were saying about the yellow makes a lot of sense. The idea is that contrast is king. Whatever is different than everything else is going to be the thing that stands out the most.
And that's this.
And that is the most different thing from the whole piece. And also, when you have the girl and the dragon, they kind of have the same level of interest. Like both of them feel equally important, and neither one is like dominant or subordinate. So it kind of like they become similar in importance, which makes the crystal more important as well.
With that said, just watch how you're mirroring your shapes and actions with the environment. I think just switching that up, making it more asymmetrical, would be even better. With that said, Yuri, this is terrific.
Yeah, I think there's some really beautiful rendering, especially in the landscape and the leaves and stuff.
All right, next up. Yuri, that was great. I'd love to talk even more. It kills me to burn through these folks.
I know, there's a lot to say.
All right, so that we can't really get any higher res. So, all right, who's this? Jay White. Awesome.
The first thing that's coming to mind here is like anatomy and scale. The dragon doesn't look big enough to be holding the rider to begin with. And then also like the dragon's anatomy feels way too unresearched. Like
that's what sticks out the most to me while we're on that is not like the colors, not the composition, but it's like kind of like the awkwardness that is the anatomy of that dragon.
Yeah. And I know there's a lot of stuff out there you can look up about, designing imaginary creatures where you come up with believable anatomy. when you look at like the musculature and the skeletal structure of different animals, which might help you design a more realistic, less noodly dragon shape.
I think it's in the wings and the way some of the body in that works.
Also, like the head, like you have like this really big head on the super skinny neck that's like the neck ends up being really small compared to the rider and the
Hmm.
head. So it doesn't feel like it could support the weight of either. And then like where the legs and the arms attached don't necessarily look believable.
Yeah.
The pose of the girl looks more believable.
Yeah, and that's, well, you
Anatomy.
could see how nice and researched that is, and the design is fine as well. I
Hmm.
think watch the color temperatures as well, because you go from super cold blue to like neutral kind of warm. And I don't know. I think it's maybe a little bit more subtlety in some of that could help. The background for this one feels like a little bit more of an afterthought than like a direct sort of design that was intentional. So it's also hard to understand what the story is, because there's like a swarm of the bad guys. Just kind of like, I get the idea that they're doing circles. She's got a ready and aimed weapon, ready to fire, but it's like, what's she firing at? So it's like, I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know exactly what the message is.
Yeah, the storytelling is lacking in that you just have this girl center stage, literally in the exact center of the image, except slightly up, pointing an arrow at nothing. Where, like, if you'd made this a landscape, you could show what, landscape oriented picture, you could show what she was pointing the arrow at. You wouldn't have cropped the dragon wings at such a weird
Yeah,
angle.
tangent.
Hmm. Which I feel like maybe looking at the anatomy of the rest of the dragon, maybe cropping the wings was intentional, not knowing like the
Hmm.
shape of them. And if you had researched that and designed that better, you wouldn't have needed to crop the wings off.
Simple solutions too. Even if you had like smoke kind of emitting up from the background in a way, like you could show that this character was pillaging various settlements on the ground, and there's like an instant story with very little, effort.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. March 19th. I don't think we have a name on this one, so welcome. I recommend, folks, again, as always, put your name right in the image. That way we can give credit where it's done. All right, the problem with this one is color and the color temperature. It's not so much even the value structure for me, but it's the color needs work.
I agree with the color needs work, but I also think that the value structure needs work. I'm getting like this checkerboard, light, dark, light, dark,
Oh,
light, dark, that's not giving me any information about which
no, that's
direction my
definitely
eye is supposed to go.
that's definitely a thing. It's kind of like light on dark on light and dark. I was just referring to it like it's the colors that are just like, I think if you, even if like this, the character and stuff was warm, this would even, feasibly could work if the background is like a different temperature, neutralized or something. But yeah, I think ultimately fixing and taming that value structure would help it out a great deal. Sorry for everybody that can hear my dog howling in the background. I've got a situation here.
I think too, like looking at the kind of setup that you have with the standing regal figure and the dragon, and it looks like they're holding a person, which is kind of hard to tell with the value structure, or it might just be the resolution in this
It's part of the
video.
rendering too. There's a lot of soft edges and forms. The tricky thing with this is that it's hard to tell what are the shapes of light and shadow like in the characters. Like there's a shadow, but where's like a highlight. A
Well,
lot of information's getting lost in there, and I
well,
think a lot of that's the edges.
what I was going to say too is that I feel like you have this figure standing on the right side of the picture and the dragon head coming down on the left side of the picture, and they're reading as separate, even though the dragon head is kind of pointing at the person. What if you had the person like standing in the crook of the dragon head coming down? You made this a portrait picture instead of just this empty space on either side of the picture. You shifted the orientation so it was a tall picture. You put the figure standing like in the like
Hmm.
where the dragon head came down at his feet, and the person going up. Then you kind of create like this rhythm of the two figures interacting with each other. And then you have like more to play with the light and shadow coming around the two figures at the same time, maybe to unify them a little bit.
The perspective's also made up here, and it doesn't look accurate at all. You have lines in these bricks going like this, then you have the perspective of the floor going like there's just not a consistency with that. And I don't even know if this wall here even needs to exist for that matter, because it just doesn't fit into this scene at all.
Yeah, which again makes me think, why is this a landscape orientation when like both sides of the image are just brick walls rather than like showing like the upper half of the figure or this top of the dragon or this tall figure.
The way this character is facing here as well almost feels like they're posing for a picture that shouldn't be happening. Like
Right.
this scene, right? It doesn't feel natural.
When you have like this interesting story of this figure holding a child next to a dragon, like I want to know more of this story. I want more storytelling, more acting, as opposed to this person just
Yeah,
staring.
because while you on that note, like I like the storytelling going on here, but the acting that's going on with the figures is what is bringing it back.
Mm-hmm.
Just
And
how they're staged and posed.
yeah, and again, going back to the composition, you have this curtain separating the dragon and the figures, and the curtain is going specifically like towards the dragon like a wall, as opposed to like on the other side where it might
Wait,
like
is this?
enclose.
I think that's the wing.
Oh, I thought that was like a
See,
curtain.
that's a
separating.
problem there, right there. That sort of clarity needs to be resolved. But I think more tweaking at the foundation structural level, planning the values, planning out the drawing and the construction of that scene a little bit more, will help get to that values and then eventually tackling the color.
Yeah, this feels like to me like definitely start studying compositions. Like look at how people integrate multiple figures into a composition, and that will help you a lot.
Benoit. Here we go. I like the colors. This is awesome.
Yeah, I immediately love the graphic read of this one, and the color, like the simplicity of the color choices is really nice. Like this is an example of like something that's almost monochromatic, but in a way that like the other one just felt like red with like black and white added to it. This one feels like there's kind of like this nice graphic shift between the colors.
Yeah, I love this. I think it's almost like a unnecessarily long, elongated. I don't personally see the need to like this is all just dead space up there. Like why not just really focus in the composition as a whole, down to like something like that. Chop a little bit of the fat off on either end.
Yeah, I could see that.
And then I personally, for me, I'd even simplify some of this stuff. This is all very high contrast noise is how I take it. It's dark on light, and it's very noisy. So again, simplicity is often the best solution in a situation like this. Just simply reduce the noise.
As beautiful as the graphic quality is, like I find that I really want to see some of those pinks reflected in the snow, like those pinks and purples reflected in the snow, which might increase the starkness of like this gray and black figure of the dragon and rider. But like snow is like really reflective of the colors around it. So if you add in some of those beautiful colors you have in the sky to the snow, it might do a lot to like just
a lot of subtlety to really bringing those out, and it'll work wonders. And it takes a lot of build up, I feel, to really start to find what you can express with some of the, because the color is going to be absorbing all those tones, so it's going to feel very deep with how those are presented.
And I really like the graphic quality of the figure on the top where it's simplified. I like the like skeletal design on the skeleton on the dragon, which is really cool looking. I think where it starts to fall apart for me is the wings. The something about the wings feels like unbelievable. It doesn't quite reach the graphical quality of the figure and the head of the dragon, but it also doesn't reach the realism of like the landscape around it.
Yeah, I agree.
It might be like just this like repetitive curve of like the bones in the wing that don't feel believable, or like this sharp ridge and like hard edged quality doesn't feel like it's a material that the wings could be made out of.
I'm still just simplifying the other bits, but yeah, I agree. I think it's really it's on its way.
But yeah, compositionally, I'd say this is probably one of the stronger pieces we've seen so far.
Yeah.
In that it feels like very distinct. It catches the eye. Everything feels like there's a hierarchy of what you're supposed to be looking at, which is really nice.
So yeah, great job, Benoit.
And also for being a central composition, it's easy for like very centered compositions to feel static, and that one feels really nice and dynamic and has a good visual flow.
So wow, Shen, this is pretty cool. You got a lot of different sketches going on.
Oh yeah, and we had wanted to make note too that like the format of sending us like an image with a few like thumbnails, like this is a really ideal format with the image large and maybe just a few thumbnails on the side to show us what you were thinking.
Yeah.
Versus tons of references and stuff that make it hard for us to see the image.
Like I know I said to include that, maybe like a year ago, but now with some of these cases, it's just like the images, the reference, it overtakes the image entirely, and it's just like, let's just make things simpler for everybody. Present your image. Maybe you want to include a couple sketches like this. That's how to do it.
Yeah, because it makes it really easy for us to see like what you're thinking as you're designing the image as well. And I have to say, a lot of these thumbnails are really cool.
Yeah.
Well.
This is lovely. I like the red and green combination you have going on here, Shen, and the blue kind of plays in nice to that as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it looks like they're friends. That's how I take it, right? She's tossing him an apple, right? Yeah. This is cool. I like this.
Yeah, I feel like this is a pretty strong piece. It's really interesting. Like, I like the storytelling in it. I like the color choices. You have a really good sense of depth. And I like the textural quality to the painting as well.
Maybe if you include a little bit of this green, as a tertiary somewhere, on the character to kind of tie them in together a little bit more, I think that would really help. Because I feel, for me personally, with red hair, red armor, red boots, everything on the character is red, which, I mean, that alone makes a statement. So personally, for me, I like, get a little tertiary kind of colors going on in there to help tie it in with the rest of the piece a bit.
I also feel like my eye is kind of hoping for some area that sharpens up. I like the brushy quality throughout the image, but I feel like I want one part to just come into focus a little bit more, whether it's, I think it would be her face as well as the face of the dragon. I want like to see that just crisp up a little bit. Yeah.
And the perspective, I think, on these stairs feels really made up.
Mm-hmm.
That at this level that you're drawing and rendering at, the perspective shouldn't be a deal. You want to get that resolved and really solidified. Use 3D, use a camera trick, whatever you can, but it looks way too made up.
And it might also just be the value, like the way you split the light and dark, that's exaggerating it in a way that makes it feel less.
Like this would be like in shadow. You'd probably see more light. So right, if your light shape, right, is this wide, that's going to gradually go lower. So you're going to see a little bit there, a little bit less, right, a little bit less as it goes up. It's not like evident at all, and that's part of what is really tipping it off.
And there's one more thing that keeps throwing me off, and it's the spear resting against her shoulder plate. And I keep expecting to see an arm there holding it up or something, and I keep looking for it, and it's not there. So there's something about that posing that's awkward.
Remove the spear. Simple solution. She doesn't need it in this picture. Remove it.
Yeah. And actually, it is in the thumbnail. I was going to say, I don't think it was in the thumbnail, but it is.
Great job, Shen, though. I like it.
Yeah, this is a really nice piece.
All right. Here we go. Different style. Tim number 1.
Oh, this is fun. This is a fun
this
style.
Is really fun. I love this. Super clean, super consistent. Everything's established. Look at that brush sauce theater street. That's a great little touch.
A little Easter egg. I feel like there's also a really nice internal consistency here in how they chose to like design the shapes and render things. Like it doesn't go back and forth between like realism and then cartoonish. Like I feel like there's a nice middle ground that everything holds.
Yeah, this is extremely consistent. I love it.
Yeah.
I would say maybe I adjust the shape of the clouds. They're almost like busy for the sake of being busy. And they're a little distracting.
I agree. I feel like the clouds are distracting to the image as a whole. Like the storytelling between this little dragon creature and the postman is really nice.
It's perfect and on point.
The clouds are like taking like...
The clouds, I don't know, but for me, the clouds is literally the only thing I can bitch about.
Yeah, I agree.
This is great. Really great job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Next. Right, we're going to...
I feel like I should find more, but I don't know much about that style of illustration either, so I don't really feel qualified to offer more.
We're back, round 2. All right, here's Another submission. Oh, this one's mine. I'll have a video and a time lapse about that up on the channel. Maybe even by the time most of you are seeing this. So we'll just drop that for now. Not important.
By the way, I do really like that one. I think it came out really nice.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. This is cool.
Yeah, I really like the colors in this one. I feel like there was like this really nice, like simple color palette that was really pleasing to the eye. One of the things that jumped to mind immediately for me was that the girl looked almost too large for the dragon.
Mm-hmm.
I just and I know like a horse would be about that size. I don't know. My brain wants to see her just slightly smaller. I don't know if that's subjective or if that's actually she really couldn't fit on there.
Like a little bit, right? A little bit tinier, something like that.
Yeah, it wouldn't take much.
Just see, that's like 20% reduction. I think would do it.
Yeah, just even lasso her out, shrink her down just a little tiny bit, and then it would feel more believable for the weight ratio. Also, I did feel like the stuff in the background got too flattened and not flattened, but messy too fast for the level of rendering in the mid-ground where the creature was. Those figures in the foreground feel way too...
Well, that's what I'm going to have to add to this critique, and really all I have to add to it, because, I mean, I like your idea, I like overall the composition, but my problem with this, as Jessica just said, is the brushwork. 100% through this image. The only ounce of clarity we do have is right here, but I mean...
Which I'm not opposed to.
Yeah, but like...
Design your brush strokes better.
But like this... I personally just have a strong opinion that this needs to be solid. Like, this is... It just looks sloppy and unfinished, if I were to, kind of categorize that. Throughout the whole thing, just work on your edge control. Because the brushwork gets too jittery.
Yeah, and instead of looking soft and blurred, it ends up looking like lots of messy brush strokes instead of, just a nice controlled, blur. But I also would say that there is some, I like the anatomy of the dragon a lot. I think this is one of the best anatomy. The dragon anatomy is one of the most believable, but her anatomy feels much more made up, if that makes any sense. Where, her chest is going into her waist with that rein intersecting, it feels like her waist, got, shrink, which I'm not opposed to, a really skinny waist, but, the edges say that it doesn't line up, and things like that in the arms. The muscles in the arms don't make sense.
Yeah, the little bit of awkwardness here and there, for sure. But, yeah, overall, I mean, it's heading in a really solid direction, and you can take this much further without repainting lots. You just have to make a few adjustments, I feel.
Yeah, it's a solid foundation, for sure.
All right, Jonathan. All right. So this is a case, I'll just start this off, but I can see hints of things back here, but it's not defined or resolved enough that's I would just remove a lot of that, because it's just this is just super distracting, being nestled perfectly in between the wings, and it doesn't look nearly thought through and drawn out enough, the perspective's made up. So, I know this is a little village road, but again, you're not defining and really sorting out a lot of that. It's just if you're not going to take the time to commit to it, get rid of it.
Yeah, if you don't know the perspective of the things, the things behind him, you have 3 different scenes behind him. You have this yellow thing next to the tail. You have this building.
Yeah, I don't know what that is, by the way, Jess, but that is distracting.
I'm not sure either. So if you went for just more, you already have it pretty washed out in the background. So just keep it much more simple and don't draw attention to all of these shapes that you haven't figured out in perspective. And even with the buildings in the foreground, I think there's some perspective issues as well, that maybe just researching how to design some of this landscape stuff in perspective would be really helpful.
You got the solid ideas. You really spent time lighting and rendering this up. Take the time to properly plot out that perspective. Heck, the easiest cheat you could do is go get SketchUp or Blender and mock up a 3D model for what that is, so you just have to trace it. Especially when you have complex structures. A stadium is no easy task, but you need to get it right, or bring the whole picture down.
Or even just look at some photography. Look at some landscape photography where you see like the horizon line stretching out behind structures and see what that looks like from the angle that you're, posing the scene from. That definitely needs some reference.
The wings look a little too made up, I think, in this case.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like the anatomy of the body of the dragon looks more believable,
Yeah,
kind of dinosaur-ish.
This is like really solid for me. There were no solid qualms with that, but like the wings feel like they were tacked on and again not thought through.
Yeah. But I would also say on a positive note, I feel like the value structure was a little more thought through. You have like some larger shapes for the value with this light background and then like this high contrast where the dragon head is coming forward that definitely drives my eye right there and says this is the point of the picture.
And I'm all on board with you for that. Definitely agree. All right. Aaron C. All right, this is cool.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to take a glance at the sketches on the side.
Yeah. I dig.
Mm-hmm. I think that the composition was pretty decent, pretty well thought out with the dark shapes against the light sky. It does feel a little noisy when you start getting to like that dragon behind the head versus the head of the dragon versus the spear with the bright red flags.
Yeah.
My eye does start jumping around a little bit. But
yeah,
overall,
I think the simple solution is to reduce the the contrast on this guy. Because like you said, it gets very visually noisy, right up in there, and that just find a way to reduce.
It's not the shapes so much as I think the values.
The values competing. I'd remove one of these dragons. Definitely that guy for sure. Probably for that guy. You don't need him. The scene doesn't need him. Maybe have like a third silhouette like that size, like really far back there. But I feel they're a bit distracting right there. The next is it'd have to be like the anatomy and some of the drawing of how this is all going down. Like a lot of that feels really made up.
Yeah, I feel like there's certain parts that feel really good, like that leg that's curling in the foreground looks awesome. The way the tail curves behind looks really awesome.
Yep.
But there's something about the face and the figure on top of the dragon that don't look nearly as well designed as like the leg and the back half of the dragon. And I'm also wondering, like, again, like seeing the wings cut off. Like I see this like really cool flying dragon scene, but both of the wings are cropped out of the picture.
Yeah, so that's a weird choice now that you mention that. Also, just to add before we finish, sculpt out some mean clouds. The clouds definitely look rushed and unfinished compared to what everything else. Look at the references that you have here. Gorgeously sculpted cloud shapes. Those need a little bit of love.
Yeah. And that dragon face. Like, that dragon face being, like, the key point of that picture, like, should be gorgeous. You should put the amount of love in that dragon face that you did into that arm with the light and stuff reflecting off the scales.
Yeah, a little bit more polish for sure. But, it's off to a great start.
Yep.
Dragonrider final. Okay, so another no name.
Oh, this is cute.
This is adorable. I absolutely adore this. I think, for me, I think it just feels like almost like a little too soft and fuzzy.
Yeah, it definitely
for
has
the style.
Unfinished feeling. Like there's no like decision making of like what edges are going to be hard versus what edges are going to be soft.
And this is an easy thing to fix too. Like you can grab, very poorly like I just did, but you can grab like a section, under the neck like that. The cheat is to you could grab multiply or color burn, right? You do like 10 or 20%, and then you can really get some nice, looking shadows and sculpted forms underneath something like that. So see if I just gently touch, underneath there with the brush on this setting, and I'll hide the selection. Watch it, like you can really see that shadow underneath there. It'll start to pop and resolve because again, it's going to fix a little bit of the softness. The same with something like again, under this wing. This is so soft and loose down there. A lot of that gets lost, and as a result, for me, it gets, unresolved. So see, like under here, like now that's a shadow. And when you have a nice shadow there, it's going to sculpt the edge of that wing out. See?
And it'll give it a hard edge, which is another thing the picture's lacking. It needs like a few actually real shadows, especially occlusion shadows, and some hard edges where you want the eye to focus. And another thing that's drawing my eye is you have this really pretty pink sunset color along the ridge of the trees of the light peeking through, and that's going to be influencing the colors. And so instead of going with the purple dragon, it feels like the light parts are white and the dark parts are darker purple, where you're missing a really nice opportunity to use those pinks to have highlights versus white for highlights.
The color temperature needs variety as a whole for that sort of lighting. With that said, this wing anatomy, it looks a little made up. I'm not exactly sure what's going on in the way this white is on the underside. I guess it looks like it's on its back, but the wings folded over. The anatomy and the drawing of the dragon itself feels very made up and not resolved.
Yeah, and I understand that it's simplified, but that you should be thinking about, if that white is the underbelly of the neck, then why is it going towards the top of the body where the wings coming out? So just to think about the design a little better when you're designing.
Yeah, because I got confused on a few levels. I didn't know if the dragon was on its back or on its side or on its belly, and I didn't even realize this until a second. I was I thought the dragon was in water, but I guess it's kind of like grass. So that should be established, clarified.
Yeah, and I think the simplicity of the sky and the tree line makes sense for the type of image it is, but the foreground where it's actually sitting should have just a little more information and design to it.
Yeah, I agree. All right, Kichi Arts.
This one is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I love this. This is so playful. Look at that.
And I feel like the face of that dragon is awesome. It has so much personality in it. One of the things that's coming to mind is that flying fish right underneath it is really stealing the show from it.
Yeah.
I think about just shrinking the size of those flying fish. The face on it is awesome. The way it's drawn is really cool.
Reduce it a good number.
Yeah, but take the focus off of it. Make it either the contrast lower or make it smaller to make the dragon bigger. Because, if that girl is to scale with the dragon and those fish are huge.
Yeah, that's what looks off about it. This is really difficult water to paint to because you have light kind of going through it. So you're going to get a real lot of levels of depth with the color of that light kind of, a lot more kind of like this at a point like that.
Yellows. The yellow of the sky is going to be affecting that, transparent part of the water more,
I think,
especially because you have it affecting the wings. The wings are glowing with this warm yellowy light behind them, so the water should too.
Yeah, at least maybe around there until you could fade it off to the side.
And as cool as I think the face and parts of the dragon are, there's certain parts of the dragon that aren't working for me. I feel the neck feels really thick for where the girl is.
Right here.
In relation to the head. If you look at where the girl would be sitting, that neck looks really, really thick. And then, if it's just the dragon head, it makes sense. But when you add that girl way up there, which she has to be able to see her over the head, then the neck looks really thick. So
yeah.
And then the tail also feels a little too artificial. It doesn't feel like an organic shape like the face does.
Yeah, there's a little awkwardness in there. How that structure is kind of working and how that volume goes. But in terms of the idea and the overall composition, I really love it.
Yeah, and I feel also the level of rendering and the choices of how you use the brushwork and the colors feel really consistent. There's a really nice a holistic quality to the whole image.
Great job, Kichi.
I'm not sure what to say about it.
Hello, welcome back. All right, so let's start off with yours, Tim. This is looking better. Are you proud of me now? So,
Tim
proud. Let's look at
Hangouts. So Tim already got a few extra critiques of the Monday Hangouts.
Yeah, and this is like a collab with Matt, since you stole Matt's piece and was working over it. The thing with your stuff here, Tim, is that the consistency overall with it. And I know this is like a terrible thing to have to do, but we're only really focusing on the negatives for most of people's work because we don't have time to go into the positives. But like that said, like your character is so well done, so well rendered and painted here. Nothing in the environment is even coming close to that level of polish. And it's a consistency thing for me, above all.
Yeah, I do feel like there's a different style in the way certain things are rendered. The buildings versus the dragon versus the girl. The dragon is like this, like, especially when you get to the head area, like trying to be more delineated with, like, you can kind of see like the edges, like the lines around it, versus the buildings feel kind of flat and graphic, versus the landscape feels kind of brushy.
Yeah, like the character, photoreal, brush and brush and brushed work for the ground, and then flat and graphic for the buildings. And then
it's a minor thing. Like, it's like you kind of have to look for it, but the buildings do look flat. Like, they look like these two-dimensional flat objects versus this kind of like brushy, rounded landscape quality that the character has.
And then line art on the dragon, like you can see the line art all in it, kind of, I guess.
I'm not sure if it's meant to be line art around the face. Like, I feel like the lower half of the dragon body definitely works better.
It stylistically looks different than the character.
Yeah. And I really like the color palette. I really like the choices of like this green with the pops of blue and stuff look really nice.
The thing with this is clearly an overcast scene, and there's a really harsh shadows.
Right.
And like for drama sake and stuff, but like the lighting and the way the shadows and stuff are handled isn't really consistent in that. Like this should all be about soft, even lighting, but like the grass and stuff in here is like it feels like all really overexposed for the sake of being it.
Yeah, I think if you look at the individual pieces, it's not so bad. If you're looking at the green part, it looks nice. If you're looking at the buildings and the like graphic quality of the dragon, it looks nice. If you're looking at the girl, it looks nice. But when you try and put them all together, it looks kind of piecemealed. Like you're seeing this light on the bottom of her dress while the rest of her is in shadow, but then like the ground right underneath her is in shadow. So that light on her dress makes less sense. It makes it look more cut out.
Like you're not going to see a shadow that dark on a day lit.
Like
softly and evenly on an overcast. All right, let's talk about the names in there. It's really small.
Oh yeah.
Carmelo, how you doing? And yeah, all right. So I'm gonna say the same thing, with Carmelo's as well as this unnamed one, is that they both are getting there, but they feel kind of really unfinished at the same time.
Yeah, and looking at the, I guess, Carmella's, I see, like, you have, like, this kind of nice form for the dragon, which, while part of it feels a little off base to me with the arms and the neck, it does feel more believable than most of the ones I've been looking at. And so the anatomy looks good, but it looks like it's made out of plastic because you get this really smooth, flat surface where it's like, okay, is it scaled? Is it amphibian? Even if it was amphibian, if you look at newts, like you'll still see like a texture to the surface, whereas this just feels like a super smooth, plasticky surface, which doesn't make sense for a reptile or an amphibian. And then the ground, again, doesn't feel like it has any sort of texture or detail or information.
Yeah, it feels like very afterthought-ish.
I don't know if it's sand or if it's grass or if it's dirt or like.
I don't know anything. I don't know if it's flowers. I just don't know. You gotta
So
resolve that.
There's definitely some material things that need to be considered of what that surface actually looks like for that type of material. I like the commitment to this like super rich monochromatic scene, and I think that it works better than that other red one we were talking about that was just too red with no color variation, because you do have a temperature shift between cool and warm. I feel like there's purples and blues,
and I'm pushing that. That's what I'm trying to do right here on screen. It's like on these top facing forms, cool those off, and it will really make the warmer accents underneath read so much better. Subtlety is the name of the game here.
Yeah. And I feel like, kind of like I'm not sure if the light is supposed to be cool or if the light's supposed to be warm. If the light is cool, then the sky makes sense. These like gray, colors, bluish colors where the skylight ends up. Then it doesn't make sense for that ground plate to have that brilliant red where the light's hitting it.
Yeah.
If you're going to have that brilliant red, then it means the light source is hot, like a hot, warm color, in which case you want your shadows to go into these cool blue, purpley colors. And so I feel like you need to choose one.
I'd also like trim a whole ton of fat off this sucker too.
Yeah, I
You got
agree.
like a lot of dead. I like having like a character situated in a big scene like this, but if that scene isn't like adding anything to your message or your story necessarily, like in a substantial way, often it's best to just focus on what you're doing well and what's kind of prominent. I'd go with a crop like that.
I do think you have some really nice like value transitions with those like really soft blurred areas in the background and then this darker figure against the light of the dragon and the rider coming forward. I think that is reading really well. And you could have like a really nice composition there with those big shapes.
Yeah, great job.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any thoughts you want to add to this one?
Yeah, I actually there's a lot of things I really like in here. I feel like there was some really thought out, some really interesting design choices in this dragon and character and landscape that are just getting lost in this like black and white silhouette thing. And I like the light on dark, but you've gone so far to where we're losing the and it's not that it's dark per se, like it's not black, that silhouette, but we're losing detail. Like we're losing the ability to see the creature, to see the shapes that you chose to design. Like I'm looking at the musculature of the arm and the wing, and it looks really well thought out. And I think that bringing
We lose a lot of it.
shots to that, like actually let us see that because it's really cool.
And everything in the background, color-wise, is warm. But as soon as those colors hit, or as soon as we're referencing something like the structures in the background, there's none of that color in it at all. Like it's a stark, dark, cool. So there's a lot of harmony missing in your color temperature here. And in saturation's also a problem. You have like this super saturated pink, up here. And it's like absolutely competing with everything else in the picture that's substantially more important than it. And two, with atmospheric perspective, this is what the image is seemingly about, is this character and everything, right here. But you have this structure that's like way far back in the distance into the same value, the same amount of detail. So it's like an equal emphasis here. I don't know why I'm on this brush, but it's doing its thing. Equal emphasis there, and it completely flattens that image because there's a lack of that depth.
And then also, like, you have this tree shoved into the foreground to kind of like stop the eye and the composition on this side. But the level of like design on the tree versus the level of design on that dragon and structure in the background is like, it feels so much less designed. It feels so much less interesting and original. It feels like here's a generic, squiggly tree shape.
The tree needs to go. That's my vote.
Yeah, I agree.
It's just not adding anything to the scene. And it's substantially larger than anything else in the scene, completely dwarfing anything that's important. Simplify. Chop it up.
I feel like, yeah, like you have something really cool there with the design of the dragon and even the design of the buildings in the background.
They're all really cool, but the way it's shown is like we can't see any of it. Is the deal.
So bring some actual lights and darks to those foreground figures.
All right. So this is kind of what we were talking about, that Edward, we just reduce and everybody else. Just a little sketch or two off to the side. This is at 100%, and this is what your image is. So, like, even if we wanted to, we can't really blow this up and get a good sense for how your image was created. And, you put a lot of hard work into that, and it deserves it, but it gets too pixelated way too quick, and it's drowned out by all this other stuff. So, moving forward, let's just not look at, like, a lot of that, and maybe just attach a couple of these on the side.
Yeah, again, like maybe 15 to 20% of the canvas at most should have extras on it.
But anyways, I like the colors. I want to say it looks like there's a spirit rising out of the... Alright, out of the creature. The problem is, like, if I didn't know this was a dragon situation, I wouldn't know that based on how I can see this on my screen, I wouldn't know that that's a dragon unless, you know, I'm reading the description.
Yeah, it feels very much like there's no point where this really comes into focus. It feels super brushy, like even to the points where it should kind of start coming into focus, where it's just like, here's some big shapes of green and here's some big shapes of glowy blue. And when I look at your thumbnail, I feel like there's so much more clarity in that black and white sketch than
right
there
here?
is. Yeah.
That's way better. Yeah, 100% agree.
And I feel like the values are better designed and controlled in that as well, where instead of having this glowy blue thing in the middle with some glowy green right underneath it, you actually see some of the forms. You see this like light opening up between the trees. You kind of have this directional thing where the light almost forms an arrow instead of like a gray glow behind the trees, then like brilliant spotlight on the dragon, and then everything else goes to vignette darkness. There's much more control in the black and white thumbnail.
Yeah, that blue's a dangerous proposition, as it's really stealing the show for what's going on in this picture, and it drowns out a lot of other things.
Yeah, that blue and that green are like all you can see in this image for the most part. They just take over everything.
And this is like a great example of this right here. Look how tiny, you could probably see this pretty well too. Like, look how tiny on my screen this little picture by, I believe, Tay Guyland, whatever, how you say his name. I know whose artist this is. But look how small that is in comparison. That's like as big as my thumb on the screen, but yet I know exactly everything going on in that scene because it's so well structured.
And
right?
even the thumbnail, I say,
yeah,
the thumbnail is way smaller than the final image, and I understand the thumbnail better than I understand the final image.
Yep.
So
stick to your plans. All right, here we go. Who's this? Another no name. Oh, Jerry. It's Jerry. Hey, Jerry. Sorry about that.
Interesting scene.
This is like caught my eye instantly. Like, you get some deals going on here. Like, they're harvesting the dragon eggs. I kind of really love his expression. He kind of looks pissed about it all, but he's kind of like, okay, I'm gonna deal with it. This is like my face when my kid is climbing on my back, banging me in the ear. Like, he's like, okay, let's just do this. Like, he's just adjusting.
There is some, like, compositional things where the dragon is kind of, like, centered, but then you have, like, these two glowing white things that are not connected on either side of him, these light openings.
Oh, this has got to go. This looks like a vagina. Like, it's just like, you know, it's just too anatomically kind of situated there. Get rid of it.
But, like, also, I was thinking, too, is, like, if you're going to have an opening of light, instead of having it like way off to the side, secondary to the head, put it behind the head. Frame the head with this like opening to the cave where like it actually draws the eye right to where the head of the dragon is.
It's like when I make it small, you just see the two light circles.
Yeah.
That's all you can see is the light circles.
But that light circle could be much more useful in the composition if it wasn't a separate object, but rather it was a framing for the head and the neck of the dragon, and then it actually looks large enough for the dragon to get out of. Yeah. And Jerry, then like, you have tons of empty space on the top and the bottom and the sides around the dragon.
Yeah, this is one of those things that I love your storytelling, Jerry. I love this moment here. I love this little situation you set up. But for me, not many parts of the composition are working to really showcase this awesome idea you have.
And think about overlapping. Like, think about overlapping the light openings to the cave with the dragon. Think about overlapping the figures. You have these figures in the foreground pulling on this rope to lower this egg onto his back. But they feel separate from the dragon. Like, what if this was more of a landscape-oriented image and those figures were actually in front of the dragon, closer to us?
Yeah, no, there's no overlaps in the scene.
So we get the sense of depth. Like,
exactly. Exactly a nice way of saying that. Yeah, it's just a weird kind of flat, awkward space. With a brilliant idea. The egg snatches. All right, here we go.
This one's a lot of fun.
Yeah, you were at the hangout working on this a couple times, so it was great to see you. And I like what you did with the light. I think that's a lot better too than when we seen it. And
I think he did a really cool job with this like composition curving around. There's a really nice visual flow to this thing that really is like dynamic and interesting and makes you want to look at this image.
This composition's great.
The only thing that's really bothering me is like this anatomy of the dragon in the foreground. The raised foot and the wing in particular both feel, especially because
this wing, right?
So
this wing feels a bit weird.
Yeah, and then that foot lifted up feels really awkward and like plastic, which the placement of it makes it really important that it reads well, because that foot is stealing the show over the whole rest of the painting.
Yeah, you gotta at least crisp up those details underneath there a little bit, I think, in this case, since it's something kind of hitting us as the viewer right in the face.
Mm-hmm. And maybe even like to do more with like darkening it under there so we're not like drawn to like this foot. Like we shouldn't be looking at the foot. The foot is not the story of the picture. Those two dragon heads facing each other, like that's where you want the eye to rest, and I just keep looking at that foot.
Yeah, so maybe increasing that contrast right in here, I definitely think would help.
And downplaying the contrast around the foot, I think would help a lot too.
Yeah, I agree. But this is lovely though.
This is a lot of fun. This is a really creative setup. I like it.
Yeah, I like it. We're just getting nitpicky with you. I get a little more specular highlights, picking up some nice little crisp specks of light on some of the scales and stuff too to draw attention to them. It's a little soft up in that head area. You see if I zoom in, if I can undo my little highlights here that don't look much like highlights, right? It's a little soft up in there. I'd clarify that up a bit. But yeah, this is good.
I feel like some part should come into focus. Probably the closer dragon, the head and stuff should come into focus. Like that part you should zoom into that and really like put some refinement in there and give it like a little bit of wisdom.
Great stuff though.
All
right, we're back. We're still rolling. Trapped Dragonrider. Look at that. The Dragonrider's like in a little cryo chamber on the chest.
That's a pretty cool idea.
I freaking love that idea.
I feel like part of me wants to see it like integrated into the dragon better. Like seeing how it's attached to the dragon in some way would be more interesting. Whereas right now it just looks kind of like melded into the front of the chest. I want to see like straps and stuff holding it in place.
Was there a name on this? Nope. All right. So I love your idea. I kind of even like it. I guess it's more cyber futuristic one, but the fact that the legs are just kind of needles looks kind of weird for me.
Yeah, there's definitely some just design, anatomy, shape things that don't make sense.
If I'm being honest, it looks like it's just weird for the sake of being weird in some of these cases. Like, it should mechanically, structurally kind of work and function. Like, those are legs, so they should have all the points of articulation and kind of work, in my opinion.
And like, why is it twisted in this way where we're looking at the legs like flat on versus the body, which looks like a complete profile? And then even the wings don't look like they would function as wings.
Get the cyber wings going like I did in mine.
When I look at like the buildings too, like the buildings don't make sense in perspective, and they just kind of look like cubes that have all been kind of like mashed on top of each other. So there's no design language to the buildings, the surface of the buildings, or even that like shape of them, the horizon that it makes. And then when I look at the dragon and I don't see any like design to the shapes and stuff, I think like maybe you want to look into like actually just like how you design the forms within your image.
Yeah, this is a complex scene. Like, this would be a challenge for any level of artist to do. So when you're going in the future, you're going kind of this cyber way where you're really being inventive with everything in your picture. It's that much more obvious when you're not taking things or pushing things as far or as thoroughly as you ought to for a scene of this sort of structure and nature. Whereas if you do like, a traditional kind of lizard-based dragon in like a snake pit, right? It's kind of like a little bit more grounded, a little bit easier to research and reference, but you're just basically taking on a much fuller plate that you got to deliver on.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't mind that it's like strange and artificial looking, but look at other like...
It's harder to do it though.
Yeah, look at other artists that have designed robotic forms, and how do they make it believable? How do they make it read as something that could exist? It like could be created out of metal, would make sense to create. Yeah, for me, it's just design language. You need to design the shapes better.
Mm-hmm. All right, Dragonrider. All right, Jefferson, how you doing? All right, so this is pretty cool.
Yeah, there's a nice softness to this. I like the light kind of coming across from the background. There's a nice sense of depth that I appreciate, but there's a level of finish to it that's missing.
Yeah.
The dragon never quite comes into focus. The clouds in the foreground never quite come into focus. Everything kind of remains hazy and kind of muddy.
Yeah, muddy would be the first word I would use if I were looking at this. It just not a lot of very crystal clear sort of clarity, and a couple aspects. You know, in the line or in the drawing and in the way the forms are painted, but also in the composition. Like, I get that this is kind of water, but it also kind of looks more like you have mountains. Maybe that isn't water. Maybe this is actually mountains. And again, there's a huge problem. It's like I don't know what I'm looking at. And whenever that's the case for the audience, you know, Jess and I in this case, then yeah, like that needs to get resolved. Because it's just like, I like that you can see the whole body in some of these shots, but the fact that it is kind of such closely cropped here, yeah, it's just a weird composition.
I feel like it's strange that the majority of the dragon is cropped out. Again, like, we're looking at a flying dragon, but we're only seeing like the head and the neck instead of like the wings or the body, which just feels awkward. It feels like we're missing a huge part of the picture.
This is 30, it's 30%. 70% is this background. But it's like, you know, what is this image? Is this image about that sky, or is it about this dragon?
Yeah, and I think that, like, you could use the wings. You can use the shape of the dragon to move the eye through the image, as opposed to just have it, you know, kind of push down to the bottom right.
This is the easy way out, right? Where you lose the limbs and everything. The wings on the dragon are the hardest part to do.
Yep.
And it looks like you totally dodged that, you know, intentionally. But anything worthwhile requires that hard sweat and work.
I will say there's something about the way that the figure is sitting on the dragon neck that feels believable. There's a feeling of weight there to the figure, which I appreciate.
But it's also, the figure feels really wooden and stiff. Like everything about that is a straight or like kind of perpendicular line. Look at horse jockeys.
Yeah.
And look at anybody, like, there's severe amount of, like, you know, like, the way they're angled and situated on things. Like, see the difference in what the language and how stiff that, you know, really adds to it.
And if the story is that this is like a really slow glide where he doesn't need to be hunched over, like if it really is like the super peaceful soaring scene, then like play that up, like really like show us how, like, you know, gentle the ride is in a way of like what he's doing. Maybe he's not even holding on to the reins.
Maybe he's smoking a cigar while going for a fly.
Like, but you have like this wind in his hair and like these like scarves lifted almost straight back. So it's telling us there's a lot of wind. So he's moving really fast, which his body language doesn't communicate.
Yep.
And I think too, just like the level of like finish, like look at your brushwork, look at the edges. So it doesn't all look so choppy and inconsistent across the whole image.
Yeah, like, see, like, look at Dog End's piece, just to transition this. Everything about this pretty much feels a lot more consistent. There's certain emphasis is the way the shapes and the forms are emphasized. There's a certain degree of clarity that instantly makes it readable and understandable for everything going on in the shot.
The edges and where it chooses to be rough and soft, or rough and smooth, are better designed.
Yeah, like, these trees in the background, you know, they're rough as heck back there. And that's okay, because everything up here is super clear and focused and refined.
I want to say this is like a really fun, like, satirical. There's something about this that is just really, really amusing.
This is like kind of like dark too at the same time.
Yeah, it's kind of dystopian with the wings chopped off and stuff. It's kind of terrifying.
I'm feeling terrible for this creature. It's shackled. It's maimed. It's got a little,
this like overweight guy with like the
looks like a little like kind of like one of those cute little chubby Asian kids. Like,
I'm almost getting like, oh crap, I feel like an asshole for forgetting his name, the dictator of North Korea.
Yeah, and then it looks like he's getting tugged by Jesus. Like that guy? He looks like he's getting tugged by Jesus.
I think there's some really cool stuff about this that I like, but I do feel like there's a little bit of choppy where like I'm looking at the guy on the back, I'm looking at the guy dragging the dragon, I'm looking at the people pointing at the dragon in the sky, I'm looking at the dragon in the sky. So I'm getting this like jumping all over. Like, what is the heart of the piece? What is this piece about? Is it about the dragon? Then play up that and downplay everything else. Is it about this asshole riding this horribly abused dragon? Then play that up. Is it about the guy dragging the dragon? Which I don't think it is. So play that guy down. Yep. Like everything is competing. Like there's a different story in each like little quadrant of the picture.
Yeah. I think it'd be a nice little touch to have this guy like popping in some like candy or like sitting there eating chips or something up there just to add to the pompousness to him.
A little drink, like a little like.
But like I'm also very confused, and maybe I'm overlooking something with this situation here. Now I know this banner must be adding something to the story here, but I don't understand why these guys are wearing kind of like modern clothes.
Yep.
I think I'm missing it, but. You know, I'm not going to be the best one for looking at everything.
My brain is saying, like, what's the story of this dragon with wings behind them? Is he coming in to get, like, revenge for this poor abused dragon? So then he suddenly becomes the heart of the story, and I want to know more about him because everyone's pointing at him. Or is the story about this poor abused dragon, in which case, like, the other stuff feels, like, way more irrelevant and should be pushed to the background and, like, really, diminished in importance. So yeah, I think you really there's a lot of stories happening in this image and you need to decide what the story actually
because
is.
Of that clarity. Everything is so clear. It's just like, okay, what is the actual message going on here is where.
Yeah. I feel like you have like 5 paintings there. Like choose one of them or do all of them as separate paintings. But there's something, really interesting to each part that's competing with all the other parts.
Jordan, yeah, how you doing? So, this, I think for you is going to be a matter of a lot of observational training I think you need, because I love the colors, right? And I love the actual story here, but for me, like, the painting itself isn't working because it looks really unfinished, and the brushwork is a lot more practice in that area. But, with that said, go get some studies, do a lot of observational drawing and painting, and I think, you come back to an idea like this ambitious, I think it'll really work.
I think there's something really interesting here in the design choices you've made, especially about the shape of the dragon. You've got this like really like stump-nosed, almost like pug-faced dragon with this short, thick neck. And then, the rider, like, really close up to the head, and then this brilliant fire behind him. There's some really interesting design choices that you've made there. And there's something about the composition that, even though it's simplistic, it pops really quickly. And
it's the contrast. We have the simple light on, or dark against light. And that is always, a primal way to get something to pop.
That is reading really well, but then when you get to the foreground, you get these rocks that don't have any interesting shape, and I'm just realizing there's people down there, which is really cool, but
it's because it's so muddy with the brushwork. The colors are good, the values even work, but like the brushwork just muddies everything up in this.
Yeah, it just feels like it just needs like something really cool is happening there with the way you've designed the image, but it just needs to be like, like pushed forward in the posing of the figures behind the rock, the shape of the rock, really finishing the face of that dragon, like giving us that level of refinement and polish and rendering to the focal point of the image. And even the rider on the back, like I'm kind of squinting at it and thinking he might be looking in the direction of the people, but I'm not sure because it's too like muddy.
This is this is also Tangent City going on here. There's a lot of tangents. You want to be a little mindful of the top of the character's head is resting against the top of the canvas. This rock and the dragon's neck are practically kissing. Give that a little bit more space, I'd argue. Would make it a lot.
Which, again, designing the shape of the rock could help.
Yep. These guys, again, kissing the edges, the nose, the tip of the tail. Give things a severe kind of clear overlap or keep them entirely separate. Avoid kissing of the edges and avoid weird boundary things where it's kind of hitting the edges of things.
It actually, one of the best descriptions of tangents I ever heard was from Chris Oatley during one of the mentorships I took from him, which are fantastic, by the way. But he said, think of a tangent as if like you're at a party and then like somebody comes up to you and they don't kind of stand back and look at you, but they come like right next to you and put their face like right here. Like, that's what a tangent feels like. It feels like it's like somebody standing next to you in a party with your face, like, right here.
There's people like that. They'll just get right up in your face. And...
like how awkward that is, that's what it feels like in a painting.
That's all tangents are, is they're a form of awkwardness.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So avoid that. Avoid doing that at a party as well.
Yes. Pro tip.
Bad for networking.
All right, Brimrun. So I love the composition. This is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I love the energy that you're bringing to this.
Yeah, there's a really nice like flow, like of the like shapes moving up and curving around the image.
I feel you're heading in the right direction with like the lighting and some of the forms, like on the dragon here, but some of it at the same time, like the wing, feels really unresolved, like unreferenced, unresearched, kind of flat, and so even though I like the overall shape of it, you know, the actual, like, the wing itself with the detail and the anatomy of it isn't working for me yet.
And I feel like compositionally, it just, in my mind, it's like, pick whether you want this to be a landscape or a portrait. Like, do you want to give, like, space above the head?
This is the fabled square, the square format, which always is a bit of awkwardness.
Yeah, I think you should avoid the square unless there's a reason to do a square composition. But otherwise, like, either way, it feels too clipped on the head or it feels too clipped on the body. So decide which one's important. If it's a landscape, have the body wrapping around. Show the tail coming up in front of the smoke.
Coming down.
Or have like it be a portrait and have this kind of like cool skyscape going up above them to show like these, you know, diagonal lines coming down. That
got really... a lot of options that would work very well in favor of this image because it's kind of there, but it feels like it's been cropped in already from a larger scene.
Yeah, it feels like a thumbnail of a finished painting.
Yeah, but you know, I think I like where it's headed. I think definitely a lot more refining with like pushing the polish, like. Okay, that's kind of like skin, but is that the skin of like an iguana, or is that the skin of an alligator, or is that like the skin of a fish? Like, you need to keep pushing things, more research, more, you know, getting in there.
Yeah, that was one of the things I was going to say as well, was like I feel like there's a surface material problem where like the sky kind of feels like it's rendered the same as the reptile skin, which is rendered the same as like the straps and the figure. And then also really quick, color. The color, I really like the monochromatic, but then the red feels kind of cartoonish in that green environment where it doesn't feel like the colors are affecting each other. So we've got this neon green light.
And a deep, cool red.
And then on the same time, like all the shadows feel like black as opposed to warm to compensate for this really
green. Yeah,
green
a little more subtlety with the colors, but I like the fact that you went with green as like an overall theme. I definitely think that works. But yeah, I agree with everything that you just said, Jess, on that.
Yep. I love monochromatic, so I'm not saying that. Just push the temperature range.
That's how you can win Jess points every month. Is this is pretty monochromatic too, and I think it's monochromatic also done really well. From Tax. Hey, Tax.
Yeah, this feels more like in the realm of stylized, like this really nice like graphic design of like almost like an animated type thing, which I don't know a lot about, but it's reading really well. And I'm actually, now that I'm looking at it, I'm seeing like in the shadows of this like log dragon head, which is really cool, this like warm orangish brown in the shadows versus like the greenish yellows of the highlights, which I think is really nicely done.
Yeah, this is brilliant. I really love this.
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the strongest pieces I've seen so far.
No, it definitely is.
The shape language, the concept is really cute. It's really fun.
I would open things up and actually just simplify things a little bit. Like I know it with all these elements off to the sides and stuff. It's like kind of vignetting, you know, the main subject. But I know at the same time, I'd like, yeah, maybe if it didn't have all of this over here and it just, you know, opened it up a little bit, you know, here and there.
I kind of like the dark shapes framing it, but I do feel
Like I
like
said,
there's
there's nothing
something.
wrong with it. I wonder, would it be better just having things open a bit, giving this really nice room to breathe?
I do feel like there's like something where it starts to feel just slightly claustrophobic, which might be part of the design, but I want to see some of those lights of the cool blue kind of like showing up somewhere else, like the sky light showing on
Hmm.
something.
I don't think it needs, for example, like these vines here. Like the vines, I don't think are hurting it, but at the same time, I feel like it would be better without them.
Yeah. I almost feel unqualified to talk about this because I
No,
don't know much about
it's
this like really
yeah,
stylized
but
type of.
ignore the style. Just look at like the structure in it for, just like how it's all put together. You can see a
And
little bit of line art, and I think that's great in it.
yeah, I have to say like there's something about the internal consistency here that's really nice. Like the way they've chosen to use like the line work to draw the leaves and the textures in the leaves and the dragon
Oh, it definitely works.
as opposed to like where they filled it in with color. Like it feels so internally consistent. I love that. That's really well
Yeah,
done.
this is extremely well done, Tax.
Hmm.
Hopefully, I give you something to think about. But yeah, this is really, really great. All right, we're up for another batch. We're still standing. I don't know how much longer, but we're still going. All right, Alex.
I got plenty of whiskey. Well, I'll keep going.
And cheers. It's Friday night. Drink and crit.
Cheers.
And another mojito.
These crits are going to get more honest as the
They
episode.
will. They will be getting more honest. So this is lovely. I kind of like the idea here, though I'm not 100% sure what the actual story is. I mean, I guess with a lot of your references, it's literally just a person riding a fairly aggressive beast, which is fine, But it's
Yeah,
like the
it
thing with
feels,
him, he's looking serious and at us, and she looks fairly bored.
she does look bored.
So this is like an acting thing for me. Like maybe she's supposed to look bored.
I'm getting this feeling of like it's supposed to be kind of like this majestic, elegant scene of like these blue and green skies and landscape, this beautiful like curve to the neck of the dragon. There's an elegance to some of the design elements, but
Hmm.
then you have this figure that looks like very like stocky, heavy, bored, very solid feeling in this very like airy, kind of cool, elegant scene. And she's kind of contrasting all of the cues I'm getting for how I'm supposed to feel in this image.
Yeah.
And like again, like the like earthy reds and yellows against this like really like ethereal blue and purple and green landscape and dragon. This really elegant shape to the neck, and then this just kind of like very like bored, flat sitting pose. Think of the way that you designed the landscape and the curve of the dragon neck, and then think of like if you had a figure that matched that. Like maybe it's like this very long, tall figure that's like arching her back and looking over her shoulder at what's coming behind, so you like kind of like complete this S curve or like repeat the shape language of the neck of the dragon. You have these very long shapes. Like even the cliffs feel very like elongated and stretched out. And then the character almost feels like in contrast to all of that design language of the rest of the picture.
I'm trying to make the character and stuff pop out more from the background. What I thought was happening is too is that the value structure of them were competing, with each other. See, it's like very dark, very warm. The
Hmm.
stuff is very cold. You want a very very immediate, maybe even way more than I even did for a separation. That's like really far away. Remember, it's so the value, the contrast of it's going to be far
Or
less.
even just like having like fog, like maybe having like some of the clouds coming between the head and the cliff behind it. So
Hmm.
it's like separating it and pushing it forward.
Like that will make the character pop. The other thing I'd want to talk to is just the rendering on the materials, particularly the scales and a lot of like the dragon. Like the character I feel is rendered a lot better, but this feels largely made up. Like that just you can paint it. I think you have the skills to paint that, but you need to get really solid references on that.
Yeah, for me, the figure is really like I almost feel like if you had just taken the figure out, it already would have been a stronger, like more consistent image. The colors on the figure don't make sense with the rest of the composition. The posing of the figure doesn't make sense with the posing of the landscape and the dragon.
Yeah, I think this one's even a little bit better here. That comp, these two I both actually like better.
I think I like all of the, I mean, I like the composition of the dragon coming up into the scene, and then the figure is like this kind of like fly in the ointment. But I like almost all of the compositions in one way or another. There's an elegance to them that the figure lacks.
Yeah. But great job, Alex. Thank you for submitting.
Well, what is the one with the figure falling out of the sky with the dragon chasing it down with its mouth open? That's kind of fun. I want to know that story.
Yeah.
But I do feel like you rendered, like, the choices of the color and the dragons were really nice. Like, there was something really elegant there that I liked.
Seal. All right, here we go. So this is cool. I like the moment.
I feel like there's something really nice about the way that, like, this, like, kind of grayscale with the warm hues placed over it that's really nice. But I feel like the shapes just don't feel right. Like, the shape of the tower feels like...
Very like a children's block. Like, it feels like a play set.
Yeah, here's a little hand-drawn, like, cone that goes on top of a tower. Here's a kind of crooked line that, like, shows where the tower is. Like, really take the time to make those shapes precise, make them accurate.
I love taking backseat to this because I draw and we do castles a lot and just with my classes, so it's great, like, just for me not to have to go there, because you called it out pretty good, and you don't spend all week drawing castles.
I don't even draw that. I don't draw architecture, like, hardly ever. I do more organic shapes, but my eye immediately looks at those shapes and go, those are, like, really kind of like rounded, simplistic, muddy shapes as opposed to real architecture.
Yeah, I mean, you've chosen a fairly linear perspective for this. Like, you have, like, it's probably like 1 point perspective. Everything's going down like that, right? And then you have your other line. That's, like, fine, and I'm not going to say that's wrong, but I wholeheartedly feel like if there was actually legit perspective in these buildings, it would be better.
Mm-hmm. Or, I mean, there's something really nice about the way you have I feel like the fire is really well done. The fire coming out of the dragon's mouth is super believable.
Yeah, like, you can feel the heat. You can feel that heat.
Yep.
And that's what it's great for.
And that framing is really nice with the buildings. And, like, if you had taken the time to make those buildings, like, top-notch, then I think this piece would sing a lot more. And I also agree that, like, I also think that the way that the buildings are kind of not well designed, I feel like the shape of the dragon isn't necessarily well designed either.
Yeah. It needs a little bit more work. It kind of looks like a rat, or like with the tail. I don't know.
Everything is kind of just lacking the detail of the shapes that make it realistic. Whereas, like, you know, in the way that there's a cone at the top of, like, a cylinder to make a tower, it feels like here's, like, this, like, round shape where the muscle of the leg is coming in front of the tail, sort of thing. Here's this round shape where there's a tail, as opposed to, like, a really nice sense of, like, drawing where you drew these shapes really nicely.
Yeah, the material of the dragon too is also not really resolved.
But the setup of the scene is really good. I feel you get this really nice scene. You get this color, this contrast. Even the atmosphere with, like, the flecks of fire going up was really nice as well.
Hey, Justin. Yeah, this came out really nice. I like the changes you implemented a lot since when I seen it. Justin come to Monday Night Hangout. He got some.
Yeah, I remember this one.
This is great. Oh, I like the colors.
I feel like there's something really, like, unexpected and fun about the design of this image as well that I really like. I like that it's like this really kind of classical feeling pose with the dragon and the figure and the landscape. The landscape feels classical. The pose of the figure feels like classical. I think there's something really nice about that.
Yeah, it's nice.
I do feel a little bit of like the materials. Like, I'm looking at the fur on the dragon.
Yeah, the fur is what is what I was thinking of as well.
It's feeling like red with white added to it and black added to it, as opposed to this, like, really nice, like, overcast lighting that you have to the landscape. Even the figure, I feel like the colors are more thought out.
Really beautiful and subtle.
Yeah. And I know I saw something where he posted where it, like, zoomed in and showed some of the prismatic colors in the white, but, like, from the
it's
zoom,
still, I think, a little too bright.
Yeah. I
Too
think that when
white.
you're looking at the image holistically, like zoomed out, like the whole like
It's still
sense of the
like
image, it's still just
really
really.
loud. It's really loud, is what they are. Even though when you do zoom in, some parts of it, right, real nice subtlety, but other parts are also just maybe like a little too overexposed.
I feel like the whites are just too bright. Like look at
Yeah.
the white on her shawl,
Yep,
where
that's
it's you just
delicate.
get you just get like a touch of the highlights, and you're not getting that on the whites of
It's
his
just like
picture.
one massive highlight,
Yeah.
evenly lit, where it looks like a flat graphic rather than really has like a lot of three-dimensional form.
And I feel like as much as I personally where the figure is, I really love. I love that
Yeah.
level of rendering there where it's like it's still brushy and loose,
That's
but
my
just
favorite
enough
part.
information. Yeah, that figure is gorgeous. But I feel like where the face is, I want to see it like I want to see something more. I want to see because that's the part like the figure is still like kind of out of focus and that face is coming forward and I want to see that just come into focus a little more, like a little more detail, a little less brushy, like some actual details in the face. Um,
Yeah.
it feels like just a little too broad stroke to me in the face.
Yeah. Coming from a pixel fucker.
Oh,
I
so.
like it. I like it. Justin did a good job.
I'm not
Faces
saying
that
fuck all
small
the
are
pixels.
difficult.
I'm just saying fuck a couple of the pixels.
All
That's all.
right. All right, let's go. Dragonflight, another no name. This is what is going on here? Is that like a mushroom?
I think they're carrying like baskets or something.
What
Oh, you're
is
looking at the person.
is that a person? Is it like a gnome? And
Oh,
what's in the baskets? Are they bringing water back from the ocean?
I'm not
I
sure.
think that's kind of like water, but I think it's gonna fall out maybe.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious, like why they have the baskets. There's a storytelling element here that's missing. What are
Yeah,
they
there
doing?
is some story going on here, but I don't think it's all perfectly clear.
If they're carrying the water, then like put water in the basket or put something in the basket. Show us what they're
I
carrying.
see subtle little ripples in here, I think. It's difficult. It's a difficult. I think that there's a lot more realism in a way kind of applied to like the environment and even the sky, and these look like nowhere near resolved to like other aspects.
Yeah, I feel like it's just like there's definitely some drawing issues where you've got to like work on designing the shapes and drawing the figures and
Yeah,
stuff
like
better.
you gotta work on the anatomy too. Like just like the raw, like Jessica said, raw drawing of this scene needs to be like a little bit more time spent at that stage.
I think there's something really fun about the way you have the clouds like creating this like opening,
Yeah,
this
and I
these
like
shapes
that.
around them, which I would actually even maybe push a little further where you have like the tail of the dragon like going up longer and maybe opening up just a little more to see more of that
Yeah, a little bit more. Like like
landscape behind them and
bringing
create
in
that sea so that it actually frames that front dragon. So it actually like pushes the eye down to that dragon in the foreground.
yeah, it's like some things you could do with it to add to that. I'd also you seemingly have the lighting coming from the left, so I'd also make a point to show like that dragon's gonna cast the shadows. Like they're a non-existent on. This guy's all in shadow, so that's fine. But I mean, you'd see the shadow of these guys,
Yeah.
and that could add a lot to it as well.
And I think just opening up like that sea in the background behind them, that like half circle, if that is much bigger, where it actually like frames some of those dragons coming out of the opening, it's going to push the eye into the picture a lot more, into
Yeah,
the dragons, as opposed to like, here's a picture of the dragons, here's this background picture framed by the
yeah,
clouds.
a little distracting in that respect. I agree, but I think it's getting there. But a little bit more planning definitely needs to go on in the drawing
Yes.
and the
And
execution.
think of overlap when you want that like opening of the background. Think of like the dragons, how they can overlap that opening, so it connects the eye between the foreground and the background. I really like this one. This
Yeah,
is really fun. There's
this is really good.
the attention to detail and like the choices in like the materials and the surfaces and the colors. Like this is really well done. Really
Hmm.
nice.
Yep. Um, I would even continue to push to simplify. Like if this is all in shadow,
Mm-hmm.
right? Maybe
Yep.
maybe darken that all even further, just to further emphasize, the character and stuff, and to create that contrast. So I don't know what's the best one to do. Like at least something like that. See how it pushes all these shapes, forward.
Yep, yep. So you get like
Little,
a better sense. You get a really nice sense of depth with the background and the foreground, but not like between. Like that helps a lot to
and
give.
I think almost the colors are like too unified in this. Like it's just like this note right here of like this pink-ish is like throughout the whole thing a little too much, which I think kind of flattens things out. Like I think you balance the detail well, but I would group everything back there, maybe subtly different, value wise or structure wise, so that you can separate the foreground, a little bit more. So see, like kind of converting maybe all this a little bit more blue or a little bit more cyan can really help the warmer colors right in the foreground pop and breathe like a little bit more.
I do find myself there's something about like the purpleness of the figure versus the blue and green of the rest of the image. And I can see that you do have notes of the purple other places, but I almost want to see something break up that purple on her figure.
Yep.
Like her skin feels purplish, the white feels purplish on the figure. Whereas the dragon itself, like there's all these greens and blues and reds and purples that all feel really consistent with each other, but it does feel varied in a way that her figure doesn't.
Yeah, and you'd get, this is all warm colors underneath here. I do think that it would be better to contrast that with some cooler greens as well, so you can have like a much deeper sense of that range of color temperature, in various parts of this. Really start to push. I mean, I just go overboard a little bit, but I think it's too warm universally, and it needs more pushing of the form in certain parts of the dragon.
I do feel like the design choices here are just fantastic. The
Yeah,
the
I
saddle
mean it's
with
really well drawn.
yeah, like I feel like when we're talking about some of the other ones and where the design feels really generic, like this is the opposite. Like the choice of having this drape that goes over the face, these rings and straps going up the neck, this really creative saddle. Like these are really interesting design choices, versus like the obvious choice of here's some cubes for buildings. And so just like thinking about that uniqueness of the design.
Yeah, really great job.
Mhm.
Like overall, it's fantastic. Hey, Woody, you're next. See, it's great you got this in.
Oh, nice.
So Woody, with this, I was thinking it's going to come down to the value structure. Um, you got some nice subtle colors in there, but the ultimate truth with a lot of this is revealed, right? When you take the color, this isn't it, right? When you desaturate the image, it's going to look fairly flat. And you'll notice this, right? It's all basically gray on gray. You have like hints of lighter tones and stuff in there, but I mean, you could push, right, the lights, and I definitely think you could push the darks in certain areas to really give it that impact that you want. You could see it in a
I
lot of these references, like there's dark on light on gray. This feels all like it's universally gray.
Yeah, it feels more checkerboardish again, where you get like light, dark, where you've got like the background is kind of going from dark and light, and then the dragon is kind of imparts light, and then it imparts dark, and then the figure is dark and light. And like you're not getting this sense of like here's a large shape of a chosen value versus here's a, large shape of the opposite value.
Yeah,
Yeah, if you make the background a solid shape, then
make it gray.
you still don't know if the dragon and the figure are lighter or darker than it because everything's kind of checkerboardish of values.
Yeah, like there needs to be that output of things grouped into families one way or another, and
Yep.
it's gonna require way more than me just coming in here like this. But you hit it like that, and then you decide, oh yeah, like where do we want to really push the highlights, in some of those areas, and then you can really start to make things pop here or there in some places, but it needs that structure.
And I do think that you've done a lot. I can see that you're improving your edges and the rendering of the surfaces look really nice. And the colors, I think you're doing a lot with like subtlety of colors there. as far as temperature shifts between the light and dark, which is really nice. But the thing that stood out to me when I first saw it is design of the shapes. Like the design of the costume of the figure feels kind of like, here's some generic fur versus some generic plate mail. Here's kind of this like worm-like shape of a dragon that doesn't quite make sense to me with like this stubby wing. Like, why are the legs so far down on this like kind of like is it like a worm with legs and like very tiny wings? And I feel like maybe like just working on the shape language, the design of the costume, the design of the dragon might go a long way.
Mm-hmm. Keep it up, Woody. Keep
doing. And I do feel like it's come really far. Like I can see a lot of attention put into like some of the transitions of color in the face of the dragon and stuff, or even in the background that are really nice. Some really nice brushwork there too.
All right, let's see how much. Hey folks, we're back. The weekend has passed. It is now Monday morning, and we are going to do our best to finish off these very amazing entries.
I apologize in advance. I'm not a morning person. But
we were much more high functioning at the end of the week with some shots in ourselves. My mind was like so much more engaged.
Yep. We'll do it though. It'll be good.
Hey Courtney, this is awesome. So I like your peaceful sort of setup, that you have going on here, and I think you're 100% referencing the absolute right kind of creature on that. Like that looks. Would you agree, Jess? Like that's a very solid reference. The problem that I think, it's not really a problem, but the issue I think that stands with this is that it looks very unfinished.
Mm-hmm.
Like you've just laid in the flat colors. Still haven't done the shadows, still haven't done the highlights, still haven't established the bulk of the texture and the detailing.
Yeah, and I think maybe too, like maybe just a little more attention in the drawing stage. Look at the nuances of the way that the jaw works on that creature that you're referencing. Look at how the scales curve around the eyes, how the neck joins with the body. I think maybe slowing down and taking more time at the drawing step of this would have helped as well.
And so, like, if you found this creature, my move would have been to, like, type the specific type of creature that is. I mean, I'm not sure what type of lizard that is, but I would amass, like, at least a board of, like, 20 images of various angles and lighting scenarios in to start building your creature off of. And that, if that means spending 10 hours alone in the drawing phase, absolutely do it. It'll be worth your time. Because, again, the weaker part, aside from it not feeling finished, is that like structurally, maybe we could do a little bit more with that composition overall. Like there's a little bit of awkwardness the way that this tree branch, for example, right here, just kind of is like kind of lazily leaning out to poke the top of the head of the dragon in the background. Be like a weird decision in my opinion. Secondly, go.
Oh no, I was gonna say I do feel like that the landscape itself is more like better drawn and more thought out. Like I feel like you've done a better job of recreating some of the shapes and surfaces from your reference photo in your landscape than you did with the anatomy of the dragon.
And remember, if you're using this as your primary reference on the anatomy, we're looking straight at the character, right? We're very even, very level with her. In your image, your horizon is that high, so we're looking down at her. It's not the biggest deal, but it'll certainly help with the overall consistency of things as well. And I would say just work out, again, I think it's just rendering on the water, little things like that. And we took a second ahead of time to kind of show a reference that kind of is doing a very similar type of dragon, but it has all the elements that you have yet to include. Things like the occluded light, in the eye crevices underneath some of the scales. You can see just an amplification. This isn't super highly over-rendered. Like, this is pretty simple overall. But you can just see, just implying, rather than getting in there and pixel fucking the heck out of each and every little scale is not necessary. I'm not saying go spend 100 hours, nitpicking the texture. But implying these shapes, right? The shape of shadow, the shapes of light, and then getting into the anatomy as well, because that on yours is like the anatomy is almost non-existent and it looks very, very made up.
And the surface textures of the scales and stuff, like looking at how well they've integrated the scales into the surface of the skin so it feels natural as opposed to like these blocky, bubbly shapes on top of the skin. And even just doing some studies of like different lizards or reptiles could give you more experience in creating that type of surface.
Look, great job, Courtney. Hope to have you submit in the future again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Very nice.
So I guess we're just closing all these as we go. All right, we'll go with this one.
Interesting.
Dr. No.
I think it's kind of fun how he has like the plane pictures as his reference. As an interesting choice.
Yeah, that is nice. So this
one of the things that comes to mind here is that there's something about there's an unfinished quality to it because everything has kind of the same surface texture from the faraway ground to the surface of the dragons to the figures to the clouds. Everything kind of has the same like kind of plastic surface to it that doesn't really tell us much about the material it's made out of. But there's also, I feel like, a lot of lost opportunity here for like color and atmospheric perspective. The whole thing kind of ends up feeling flat, where I feel like you could do a lot of things with light, like kind of blowing out the background and having the light come over the clouds or the ground to make it more like visually interesting and appealing, as opposed to kind of this flat green with the white clouds. And like everything kind of just has this very matte color lighting.
Yeah, it's fairly flat execution. I think if this is your marquee kind of key point, I mean, it's reading like that because of the contrast, but if he is heading in this direction, a lot of what's happening in the shot is kind of like behind the character. I think it would have been a little bit more comfortable of a choice to have the character be on this side heading forward with this room to breathe.
Yeah.
Because he's like kind of just facing straight out of the comp, but there's like nothing here. There's no hook. There's no sort of visual flow with how a lot of the actual shapes, internally are kind of working together.
Yeah, and I think like he's trying to mimic the placement in that plane photo beneath, but I think that the image is serving a different purpose than like painting isn't going to read the same way as a snapshot of these old planes is going to read. It's going to read as like the painting isn't set up properly because the dragon has more of a sense like he's saying, like it's flying out of the picture. It's an animal, it's a person, it's a creature that we're expecting to see some sort of storytelling from, whereas the planes are literally like this flat object that's being recorded.
It's a documentation of it.
Mm-hmm,
and it's a photograph. They're up in World War. They're going into battle, whatever the case may be. They're just getting whatever documentation they can on the event. You have full creative control over every little placement of cloud, every road down below, and of course the characters. So use that control to take advantage of every single aspect of it.
And even if you look at the photo that you chose, I'm looking at the main one at the bottom left. Look at the way that the clouds actually create like a visual flow. Like they kind of create this half circle underneath that is like pushing the eye like a fan underneath the planes, as opposed to yours. There's like this checkerboard of cloud opening that doesn't actually push the eye through the image in any meaningful way to create a visual flow.
And I think looking this much down on this dragon, you're going to see a lot more of these wingspans. They look really flat because everything's kind of tucked in really neatly. So I rather than looking at plane and flying, I'd look at a lot more images of like bats, hawks, and eagles flying to really get that sense with the creature. But
it's a fun idea though. I like the setting it up like this documentary type image.
All right, another known. Well, there's an initial, A. AD, SD. Okay. Well, welcome to the challenge. Yeah, I did the names down there. I can't read it, but that's okay. So you got a battle scene, like a siege.
What's in the water? I'm having trouble seeing.
There's like a settlement, and like these dragon guys are attacking. So this is like very high detail.
Cool.
There's a nice attention, texture in some of these elements as well. These look like leaves.
I like the kind of like flying lizard design. That's kind of fun, a little
Yeah.
different. I think the thing that's really jumping out to me is the colors. You get kind of this neon teal water, neon like I
Yeah.
guess not neon pink, but you get
The colors aren't gelling for me.
yeah, like the entire scene, like the landscape is like these really muted greens and grays, and then all of a sudden you have like this like bright yellow, bright pink, and bright teal, which isn't integrating with the entire landscape around it. Like if the landscape itself is that muted, then the water is going to be muted.
Like
Um,
your trees are gonna look a lot closer to like at least like this color, where they're like a lot more vivid and a lot more vibrant. You'll see shadows a lot closer to being like, in this sort of range. And then you might see like a highlight. Warm that up just a bit. You'll see your highlights kind of like that. And that would be a lot more internally consistent with the water choice.
Because you have to think the water is reflective. So whatever is around, like whatever is around the water is what color the water is going to be. It doesn't have its own color. So if it's that blue, then it's reflecting a sky and a landscape around that is that saturated.
I'd also be maybe a little cautious too with the, I would say the overuse of like photo textures at this stage. Because it's very photo intense, and you got to remember the density of detail you get with a photo is really, really high. So you have like all these really, like micro details of trees, leaves, and foliage back there, and then there's, things far, far more important, far closer that don't look, kind of like nearly as refined as that, and that's because the photo did so much heavy lifting for
Hmm.
you. So I'd recommend to be cautious of that.
And then it ends up that the textures of those trees and stuff in the background that you put in with the photos is competing with
Yeah.
the main point of the image, which was the dragons, which have way less texture and surface detail.
So I like your composition. I like your story. I like the narrative. The lighting, though, is not personally working for me.
Hmm.
And,
Yeah,
and and that texture is kind of a victim of that.
I would maybe do like look at some paintings that you really like and look at the color palette. Like maybe even take a color picker and go through and see like how they, the sky versus elements of the landscape versus things inside, like objects, animals, people inside, and see how the colors end up grouped together. And maybe even do some color studies of some paintings that the color palettes really strike you,
Hmm.
because the color in this feels really disorganized and not designed, and I think that could help you a lot if you could get a better handle on that.
Summoning. All right.
Oh, that's
This is a little charming picture. I kind of like where this is going. I like the subtlety with like kind of like the storytelling you have going on here.
yeah. There's a really nice mood to this.
Mm-hmm. And it's
I
a
like
nice
it, like
consistent style too.
yeah, the sense of space is really nice, like the sense of light in the atmosphere and then darkness in other areas of the atmosphere. I think it's very pleasant.
Maybe like as a crop guy, I'd probably trim some of the excess, off to the side. Maybe like bring this in, make it a lot more. This is an intimate kind of like very kind of personal sort of scene for these characters. So I'd maybe like really double down and like keeping that focus, right there where this moment is. I think we're so far zoomed out, so far removed from this image, when everything important, right, is kind of happening right there. It makes it a lot more delicate of a scene. What do you think?
I think that as much as I do like kind of like the staging, I think that when Tyler crops it in like that, it helps with the composition immediately because instead of having this river, this bright light shape going right through the center of the image, it pushes it off to the side and kind of ends up framing it in a kind of mirror way of the sky that frames that whole side of the picture and pushes the eye over to the dragon. So I think it does solve some compositional problems when you
And
do that.
and you could still take like this whole section if you like parts of it, right? And you could just like
Mhm.
amputate it over, bring it in to frame it, and then redesign the river around some of these elements. And like that's the same sort of solution, and it would equally sort of work.
I think one of the things that's kind of setting off alarms in my head is how like smooth it seems like it's set up like it's supposed to be a forest scene, but it also looks like manicured lawn, like mowed lawn. It
Yeah.
feels there's no underbrush, there's no leaves in the grass, there's no small bushes. Everything is either like these super clean trees or this super clean grass, which is kind of like it's making my brain feel like it's not finished.
Yeah, it
Which
does. It does have a little bit of that unfinished sort of look to it. Like I think the polish, right? The polish could be pushed, further.
Yeah, and I see there's like some really nice little textures of flowers and stuff in the grass that I like.
Push
But
those, group them.
yeah, my brain is saying that like a natural setting is not this clean and simple.
Hmm. Yep. And you could even push some of the variety of colors on that dragon. Like it's all pretty like monochromatic. You could
Yeah.
really get in there putting greens into the shadows, cooler tones in the light, and be wary of like these, the light coming through the trees. That sometimes it can look a little too gimmicky and phoned in.
Mhm.
Not that it's wrong altogether, but yeah, it just needs to be handled with a certain amount of delicacy. But overall, I really like the direction that this is heading in. Well, I get a lot more references on the water because I do think it's a little too bright and not really reflecting anything in the surrounding at all.
I do find there's that round shape in the background that's
Yeah,
really
there's
catching my attention, and it's like it's so unexpected and unusual that like I keep looking at it going, what is that? And I feel like it's almost kind of stealing some of the
yeah,
storytelling
I
because
think
there's
so.
no explanation, there's no way of knowing like what that is.
I agree.
Yeah.
Like that could be its own uh, design, its own scene.
Right. It's kind of just shoved in the background, but like your brain is going, what is that? Why is that? Why is that there?
Hey, Will, welcome to the challenge.
Cool.
All right.
I
So this is
like I like the figure. I feel like that is really well done,
yeah,
executed.
yeah. The
It's
figure looks really nice.
it's a difficult perspective and some difficult materials that are done pretty
two
well.
two things that stick out to me is like maybe a little too monochromatic purple overall between the dragon and the rider. Like I try to get a little bit more delicacy, like how you can inject a little bit more colors into that range and spectrum. I
Yeah,
think I have like the immediate answer for that, but that's what I try to fight for.
I feel like one of the things that keeps catching me about this image is the way that the shape of the dragon and the values of the dragon, the head kind of disappears. Like we've already
Yeah,
lost the wings because you've chosen to do this like super close in crop, which kind of makes sense for the amount of detail you've put into the figure. But we've already lost the wings, so we're like, okay, well at least give us like that really cool like image of the face. But the values of the face and the neck are so close together that it all kind of blends in and becomes one big solid shape instead of actually coming forward in space and giving us like really cool details that are going to make this dragon pop out.
yeah. I think probably the easiest solution for that is to add more light, right, to
Like to the neck area.
to the belly.
Hmm.
I don't know what brush I'd use to do that. I'll use this one for now, but ooh, that's a big guy. So let's just very quickly.
Yeah, some of those teals from the sky, maybe those greenish.
Yep, a little bit of start bringing it a little more in the blue range. Right, you can get a lot of cool variety. Add a light on a texture like this, and just build it up again and again, and erase and build it up and build it up. But you can really get a lot of variety. And just to kind of show you, of course, a guy really good at that is someone like a Rowan Gia, right? Like if you see some of his blues and purples, right? Look at like the hair. Like there's a spectrum. There's like a range to that color where it doesn't quite feel so one note. And that's what I'd push for is the subtlety. Because I mean, structurally overall, it's very good, and I think you're heading in the right direction. The background feels a little phoned in, I have to admit, though. It looks like it's an afterthought.
Yeah, I do feel like this composition, while I understand the need for the cropping in, it does feel like we've lost so much just to get this close-up shot of the girl, where the background isn't really doing anything for the composition. We've lost like the wings and most of the body of the dragon. I feel like you could zoom out a little bit and give us a little bit more
Yep.
of, what's around her and the shape of the dragon, the design of the dragon.
So on the theme of close-ups, we have another one from Adrian. Hey, Adrian. So again, I like a lot of your style and your design. It's really cool. I think the anatomy though on this dragon, on this creature, definitely needs a lot of work.
Yeah, the anatomy is something that keeps kind of catching the eye as like not working, not right. It feels a little like plasticky, especially like the wings and the neck. Like
I know what
yeah,
you're saying.
not yeah, plasticky in the sense of not the surface texture,
Like
but
you
in
have a good line
shape, feel.
that brings us there, but you're sacrificing like logical sort of anatomy for a creature like this, and I don't think it's worth the expense.
I will say that I feel like the background, how you very subtly implied all these complex shapes behind them is really nice. I feel like there's a lot more thought put into the design of those shapes back there, or it just feels like more like organic and naturally successful than the shape of the dragon.
We had another situation similar to this too last month where two guys were dueling on the roof and the person cut off the person on the right. So this seems to me like an awkward choice. So you have just two elements, right? The creature and the person, but we're cutting off, like bullnose style, that dragon, like rather bluntly.
Well, it's like you have to decide again, like what's the heart of the piece? What is the piece that's really important? And so if you're cutting the face of the dragon in half, like taking it out of the picture halfway, you're telling us that the dragon head is not important, which would leave that main figure on his back, the rider, to be the heart of the piece. But the Dragonrider is completely subordinated by becoming dark on dark, where you haven't even let us see them. So you've subordinated the dragon head by cropping it off the picture. You've subordinated the rider by grouping it dark on dark. And so it's like the two pieces that would say, like, this should be the heart of the piece aren't really giving you that satisfaction as like the focal point of the image. And so what ends up happening is that purple star in the background becomes the heart of the image.
Yeah, I agree. But I mean, I think it's got the workings of like a really cool idea.
Yeah. So I feel like, so pick one. If you want the Dragonrider to be the heart of the piece, then really go to town and show us the Dragonrider. And then it might work to have so much of the dragon cropped out because it's not as important. But the way that it's painted now, I would say the dragon face probably should be the key point of the image. So then you would need to like zoom out a little bit and give us the...
We're back with the final rounds. We've finally made it here. It has been a long, long journey.
The last six? Are we down to the last six?
Yes, and the soul still burns. All right.
I saw this one in the Discord. It looked like they were putting a lot of work into it. The main thing that jumps out to me when I look at this one is just the checkerboard of values. You've got like really bright whites and really dark blacks, and they're not grouped together. So you're getting like black, white, black, white, black, white all over the image, and it's kind of just creating a noise instead of like...
See, that's what it is.
Big shapes.
Because like if you simplify, right, some of this detail right under noise, put the median on it, and we look at it kind of just like this. Like, that's its initial read. And this is how somebody is going to see it online, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, ArtStation, and it's very unclear, right, at this stage, like, what is happening.
Yeah, even when it's zoomed in, when it's not blurred out like this is still what the brain is perceiving the values as. Like, this is what the person looking at your image, even when it's, like, full res and color, the brain is still looking at this as the skeleton of the lights and darks, trying to figure out what's going on.
So think more broadly, like, this is, like, the background shape. Like, that you can group a lot together. And part of the deal with this is that your values have equal contrast throughout the entire thing. So it's max black, max white, max black, max white, all throughout the whole thing. Tell some of those values, to take, set them on the bench. We don't need them competing with everything else. So see how I'm just subtly like obstructing some of that range back there. And this is a very kind of modest way of doing that. Like, you could still really push some of these things a bit further, but it's like, you could really set up the lighting, for that situation. Like this light right here in the corner is still stealing the show because it's the brightest thing in your scene. And I think honestly, if you
I feel like
implied more of that rather than showing it.
He's trying to put like this spotlight on the face of the dragon and the girl in front of the dragon. So like put the bright light like down the front of the face of the dragon. Group all those light shapes of the face and the person together so that they are all reading as like one big shape instead of this dark chasm down the middle of the dragon face.
And then you can create a background, and then you can have that light pop out, just a bit more. And then you can have ambient light, right? Ambient light coming back to subtly illuminate some of the top, right? Like nail all this way further back. So that's all subtle ambient lit. And then you keep these warm colors. So warm, this would be cool. And then you could bring the whole thing up, like brightening up a little bit down there. Because again, this is like really, really, dark, and it just reads as like a massive blob, black in there. So we see like a lot of things lost in the image. So like even like Jess said, when we zoom in, it's kind of like even abstractly, like I don't even know if that looks like so much like an eye. It's like almost like too creative and not enough reference.
Yeah, and I feel like the dragon face is getting split down the middle because of the way, I mean, like I know there's like a design element of something going down the middle, which you could still keep the design element, but make it light so it's not like you have like a light ridge here and then darkness where the face seems to like disappear, and then another light ridge where it's almost like a separate item.
I like the emotion that you have in this scene. I think like a little more front-loaded design work at the beginning, more research, more planning. You'll be in good shape. But I think it's just take things a little bit slower overall for most of these people to draw things out and get meticulous with things.
Yeah, I did, like, one of the things I liked about that one was it did feel like there was some nice storytelling going on. It definitely, like, drew you in. There was, like, a very intimate feeling between, the characters in the image.
Hey, Scott. I like this, Scott, too. I like this kind of playful nature going on. I like that subtle dragon tail right in there. I'd do something maybe even to make that a little more obvious. And I think the name of the game for you is, like, I like this moment. But again, I know probably by design we're supposed to witness this like from an onlooker, but I don't know. It's like one of those situations I'm torn, because I do think inherently this would be quite a bit better if we lose, some of that stuff and just really double down, on that moment. Like I don't think anything in this areas that I crop makes this image within the box any better.
Yeah, it's not really like providing any like visual. I mean, the waterfall coming in actually does have like a nice visual flow pushing the eye down into the dragon, but the rest of it, the trees, the rocks, everything else just kind of is like these static elements off to the side that don't push the eye or move the eye through the image in any meaningful way.
And for like these white sort of pearl dragons, I have to say the competition is a little bit high for that sort of thing. We were looking up right before we met. There's like a lot of very beautiful, I don't know what I just did. A lot of beautiful subtle white dragons, and I think that needs a little bit more. Like you've started to build it up, but build it even further. Like the wings, right? The wings feel very unfinished.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like the shape of this dragon is better thought out than a lot of the ones we've seen. There's some definitely really nice anatomy things going on, and it feels believable. But the surface is, I mean, there's some nice highlights with the underlighting of the water and stuff, which is really, really pleasing to the eye. But then, like, there's other areas that just kind of go flat and empty, like the wings in particular. I feel like the face as well doesn't feel like it has that same love that, like, the neck has or the belly has. Mm-hmm. And another thing that's really catching my eye is the pinks feel really out of place in the image.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing in the environment that's telling me that this pink exists in this environment. The colors of this scene are not giving me any indication that these colors are going to, the light spectrum is not going to reflect these colors. Everything else in the image is like very kind of yellow, muddy greens and grays. And then this pink doesn't seem to fit in that environment. Mm-hmm. But if you maybe put some pinks in the sky, warm up the light in the sky, put some of those iridescent pretty colors in the sky or the water, and then all of a sudden it's going to make sense.
Yep.
The colors will feel more integral to the whole scene.
But, I think it's really getting there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It really is.
I really like this one.
I do.
And I like the sense of water and stuff from the dragon.
Yeah, some of the
like
the
movement,
definitely
the
some
water and stuff
of
is really nice.
the better water we've seen this month. All right, feline. You entered the challenge. So this is a bit of a different take on this. You have like a race of dragon people, and you know you have one of them riding. So technically, you're fitting right in, and you know that's commendable for that.
I always like the creative interpretation. It's fun. Um,
For me, you go.
one of the things that's really popping out to me is how the same all the figures are. You have three different people, and they all have like the exact same colors of like pink, purplish hair, orange clothes, dark brown shadows, feet, bags. So it's kind of, I don't know, there's part of me that feels like, why are they identically colored? That's raising some questions in my head. Even if they're like in the same family or they're meant to feel similar, I feel like there would be some sort of variation in design between them.
A little something. I mean, the only thing that's different is really the hair. And like maybe like a little more design work on those, on like the orange outfits, emblems, sigils, patterns. Feels a little underbaked in that respect.
Yeah, and I think it's also like they're becoming they're losing their character. Like the dragon rider on top of the other person, if that's the heart of the piece, well, he's just blending in with the person that he's riding on top of because they're so identically colored. Like that, there's nothing special about that one that's jumping out and saying that he's different or, you know, this is the part of the painting that we should be really looking at. This is the story. It's just uniform with all the rest of them.
You also have like the character's bandana pretty lit here, but if you got like a highlight on this character's head, you can, since most of this character's face and stuff, that's all in shadow anyway. Like I continue to push that so you can have like this highlight that goes right into here and right onto here. But, you know, with that said, a lot of these wrinkles and folds, they feel like you made them up. So if you made them up, you know whether you did or not, and if you didn't, I'm sorry. But it definitely like would take a little bit more time, a little more reference to really kind of build those up so that they're kind of flowing a little more naturally.
I will say I like the background more than I think. I feel like the background is more sophisticated in some ways than some of the choices in the foreground with the value structure, the lighting, and they all feel like two separate paintings.
It does, and that's like there's a little awkwardness too with this perspective. Like, are they on a like a ramp, like an incline? Are they supposed to be on stairs? The way they're kind of situated here and how the angle's presented gives a little bit of awkwardness for me personally. Like, why are they just walking right against the bottom of the canvas? Like, for me, the more the stronger design decision would have been to situate them up, you know, within frame a little bit more carefully. Right, so you have a little bit more space to play with. The other thing that's really catching me as something that could be adjusted would be like these lanterns and the strings and stuff that are like it's like a kind of like a weird little bit of a design thing that for me I just find distracting. And I think the scene overall would be better if they're removed or put like much more subtly, you know, somewhere down in the background.
Yeah, I like the shape of them. I think they have an interesting design to them, but they are kind of competing with the figures. And it feels like you needed something to kind of separate the two, have like the background and the foreground of the picture, and that's why they ended up in there.
But overall, very creative solution for this month. So yeah, it's a pleasure having you.
I also like, I just want to say real quick too, I like the palette. I feel like there's something really nice here with like the orange palette, which is the cool shadows.
Yep. You did the palette very well. Kiko art. Oh man.
Cool.
This is wild.
This is really fun, yeah. I really like the acting and the figure. I think that's really fun. And I can see you put a lot of work into the water. I feel like the dragon, in comparison to everything else, the dragon is less thought out and less well designed. Like, you put a lot of work into referencing the anatomy of the person, whereas the dragon kind of feels like these squiggly shapes that are pushed up to the top of the canvas to kind of like hide some of the missing anatomy decisions.
Giving it the old, you know, design test here, and there's a lot of value and by extension saturation, I think structure problems, you know, with this. So see, that's basically your structure right there. and it is, you know, completely unlegible as to what's going on. And that's how my eye, like, if it's like that big on my phone, that's how my eye is kind of interpreting. The best thing it has going for it is that the dragon is red and the character is pink, and that's what makes him pop. But you could do a lot more in a lot more sophisticated of a way to really group, right, and manage, right, a lot of these little individual facets. So like whether you go lighter or darker, like on something like the background here, it ultimately, you know, doesn't matter, but it should be separate. Like there should be this structure, you know, to that. So see, again, like all that, like that's a shape that's not working as a shape at this point. And so one solution, right, is to make it all very, very dark. Another solution would be, again, to remove the contrast,
make it light,
make it a lot lighter. And then by inversing that selection, where are we at? Select, inverse. There are these people out there like, there's shortcuts for that, moron. I don't know shortcuts. I don't have enough room in my brain to remember shortcuts. I got enough going on. I don't know. I know copy and paste. That's like it.
I know the shortcuts I use all the time, and that's it.
See, and then we're grouping these together. So this is where it's really suffering, is like seeing the hierarchy of that structure. And the drawing underneath, I think, is fine. But you need to plan these values into simple shapes and families of light, families of shadow, a little bit more carefully.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you could even separate the water, and then from the character, you could separate, you know, the character from that to make the character read. So
yeah, like, I would have the environment probably lighter in general, and then the figure and the dragon darker. But I do feel like compositionally it's one of the things that's really messing with me about this image is the way that the dragon is kind of like crammed up to the top. And I feel like we have this scene of like basically the storytelling here is you have like the person kind of falling out of the sky or the dragon trying to hold them up. So I'm wondering, why did you go with a landscape almost square orientation versus maybe a portrait oriented? Because if this was a portrait oriented image, then you would have room for the dragon, you would have room for that feeling of height, the peril of falling, that feeling of distance, the room for the water, as opposed to just like cropping all of that off, which kind of competes with the storytelling.
Absolutely. See, like, gotta make these things pop out. So maybe like full range value structure on the figures, going all the way dark to all the way light. Maybe like a gray actually for this shape, and then really light, you know, on the wave. So yeah, I'd have to just go back in and really fiddle those shapes. But think of dark, medium, light. How can you chop your painting up into those three sections?
Yep.
Because that's really what it needs. And then, of course, the saturation of the color is very vivid in a lot of it, and I think it'd be a little bit stronger toning down some of those and then coming in, adding those bright, saturated colors where it's important. All right, Matt P. This is another great, clever idea.
That's funny. Oh.
Yeah, like really, really cool, really creative. You know, nice little reference, little thought. Yeah, this is cool. Like playing up that imagination.
One thing that's catching my eye is when I look down at that bottom thumbnail right next to where it says BST Dragonrider. Yeah. That thumbnail is so much more dynamic than the final painting, with the you know, seeing the boy's face in 3/4 view versus the profile, seeing the dragon toy that he's riding in 3/4 view versus the profile, like it gives it so much more like.
Yeah, I agree.
The profile flattens it. The profile gives it kind of like it's a symbol rather than like it's this three-dimensional, you know, object in space that's alive, which the bottom thumbnail has a lot more of. And I also think that in that thumbnail down there, you really got that like heart of the piece. You really have that like that boy's face and the dragon, toy dragon that he's riding. Like there's so much like story right there, and your eye goes right to it and knows what the story's about. Whereas the final painting, your storytelling is lost a little bit because it's competing with the boy on the toy and then the dragon behind him, and you're not sure where the story is.
Yeah, well said. And I'm just like trying to find these internal shapes, right, of light and shadow, right, that could really do. I think the best way to get this across is just to give it an old kick with the color dodge, just to illustrate my idea here. Right, so green, just pick, I guess it's not going to pick green. Pick green. Okay. Right, so bright that up. Blue, purple, brighten that up. But having like that light really clearly, separated from these lights of shadows and highlights, and then you could blend and blend those in, basically from there. Like a very ugly blender, but subtlety, with this sort of thing. That's going to be form shadow. That's a cast shadow, and really getting in there and working those shapes for the clarity. Something that I am seeing, in parts look a little bit better on the thumbnail, like Jessica said. But it's got to get this guy to pop.
And then again, like knocking back that dragon in the background, you did a better job, I think, of subordinating it in the thumbnail than you did in the final painting.
Yeah, like you could lighten up a lot of that and then really increase, right, the areas of that light to, coming in. Like if he's got the flames coming into there, right, you could really get in there and up a lot of that heat and then feel it, internally on this. Like you could still add this like really crazy level of magical sense to it to capture the childlike wonder. But yeah, the idea overall is like really good.
And I would suggest going back and revisiting that original or that thumbnail on the bottom, because I think that you did something right there that you lost in the thumbnail that you chose with the storytelling. And I feel like the setup is already stronger, the composition's already stronger, the value structure is stronger in that bottom one.
Yeah, definitely. But cheers for having this really great and original idea.
Yeah, it's really fun, really cool.
Right, last, Sam Woolman's Dragon and the Rider.
Last, woohoo!
So this is really clean, simple, and direct.
And I feel like it's almost like there's no composition. It's almost like a character drawing on a flat background, because like how empty the environment around it is.
Yeah, it's an interesting choice. I'd be interested to know what were some of the decisions being made, and like, okay, I'm gonna forego narrative stuff and just drop it in. Because maybe at that point, just almost minimizing the background almost entirely, and then chopping it out. Be like, this is just a concept, right? This is just like a simple little idea, and then make it basically a vertical. Because I don't know whether this is supposed to be like an illustration or like a piece of like a concept design.
Right, because of how minimalistic the environment
is. So you're giving me mixed messages, and that's something you never want to give, just like a client in general. This is like,
and I would even make it taller, like a little bit of breathing room on the top and bottom.
Mock up a book cover, draw a thing in, and then do a little more set dressing. Mark it up as like this book cover, and like you could have a lot of success there. But otherwise, it's just like, I'm just like, why is the biggest things that come up.
Yeah, like why is it that 2/3 of the canvas is empty space on the front and back, or like on the left and right sides? And I like, actually, I feel like even though like, we're saying how empty the background is compositionally, I do like you have some really nice transitions of
beautiful subtle transitions.
The sand going up into the cloudy, which is really nice. And I almost want to see some of that, like in the way that the characters are painted. I feel like when you get to the characters, you lose some of that like nuance and subtlety to the color transitions, and it becomes much more like, instead of going like warm to cool as it lightens up, it just goes like, here's a flat color. I'll add some white or black to it to change the value.
Your color temperature for a lot of this is really holding back the forms, and how they're really reading. So maybe, one thing you could do is to take these groups, right? And that's what I'm doing. I'm just selecting groups of all these elements that are technically shadows, warm them up a little bit, and then add hints of cooler tones, cooler neutrals rather, into these highlight shapes.
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah,
But you got to think of it that way.
think about the environment and the colors you've chosen for the environments. You've chosen these kind of like dark sandy colors for the shadows and these like kind of cool grays for the highlights and the clouds. And so some of that is going to carry over into the color choices of the figures.
I'll just end with this. If we pick that green, the greenish yellow, and go with like a cooler version of that, and then neutralize it, you could start to hint and imply, you're just kind of feeling this out, you can get a little bit of these color shifts, overall, that it separates it family-wise from the shadows.
I even color pick for my environment a lot as I paint the figures in my scenes so that I'm pulling colors from the environment into the colors of the figures and objects.
But it needs like that sort of delicacy. Not with these brushes. I build the things up with like lots of little layers, but trying to create that separation overall with the tones of the shadows and the highlights, and then go in once these forms are all reading. Then you can decide individually what you want to add texture to, because it definitely feels like a weird kind of balloon creature because there's like an even flat texture to it that kind of makes it look a little more plasticky.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the surface materials is kind of lacking any information. Everything looks like it's made out of the same material.
But anyways, that's my 2 cents. Thanks for dropping it in.
Cool.
All right, we're gonna find our favorites.
Oh crap! I don't even.
All right, we're back. We have our final picks for our favorites. Dragonrider here by Tax and by Corny Cockcroft. Really beautiful stuff.
We couldn't really decide whose were whose was whose favorite because we both loved both of these a lot. So we both picked the same two.
Yeah, we really did. It was actually kind of easy, I guess, for us too. Like we just really were gravitating toward these.
Yeah,
just like the care, the effort, the subtleties. Really, really nice.
The design choices, the details, like it's just really well done, really internally consistent.
And we have the next challenge we're going to announce now, which would be the Witch Hunt. Minimum 5 figures. Pay attention to costuming. What you can choose the time period that this is going to be in, but probably make some kind of historical context would be my suggestion. Did I miss anything? Narrative.
No, just storytelling to make sure that you're using the setup of the figures and the costumes and design choices to tell a story. Tell us what's going on.
And what's today's date? Today's the
29th.
29th. So May. Let's just the first week of June. There's a little leeway at the very end for when we actually critique these. So let's just aim for the first week of June. We'll have that challenge critiqued. All right. So thank you guys for watching and submitting. It's been fun. And it's been a long road. Take care.
Yep.
All right.